My name is Justin Bro with Argonne's Communications and Public Affairs Department. Today we're going to be talking about water and power. Actually, the value of water power. Have you ever heard of pump storage hydropower? You may have, you may not have. Essentially what we're going to be talking about today is generating electricity with water via pump storage hydropower, the word I used earlier that you may or may not have heard. So we're going to be talking about that today. I do want to give you a little background though. So pump storage hydropower is a commercially proven energy storage method that uses pumps to transfer water from a lower to a higher ground, say when wind and solar energy resources have generated all the electrical power that they need to, and when electricity rates are low. Then the water generates electricity as it goes back downhill. So we're generating electricity by falling water and rush through propeller-like turbines when, say, solar and wind energy is scarce, user demand is high, and rates are at the peak. Now, you think that we know everything about this technology, but until recently, we didn't have a way to value pump storage hydropower, which comes to our discussion today. Today, we're going to be talking about a new valuation guide that was produced to create the value and understand the value of pump storage hydropower. We're going to be joining us is DOE's Katie Jackson, we're going to have Argonne's Vladimir, and we're going to have Ride Development's Eric Steinle. So I gave you a little background on what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about generating electricity with water and this new valuation guide. So without further ado, let's see if we can get our first guest, Katie Jackson, to join us. And let's see if Katie's on the line. Let's see. Vladimir's there. Hey, Vladimir. Hey, Max Pants. That's a cool name. I see Eric joined. I'm not seeing Katie. There we go. Dr. Katie, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna go live with Dr. Engineer at the Department of Energy, Water Power Technologies Office. I'm gonna start off a conversation, a little light conversation, talking about generating electricity with water. And good afternoon. Let me fix this up. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. Happy National Hydro Day.
Happy National Hydro Day. Here, let me move this again. So why don't you give us a little background on who you are at the Water Power Technologies Office and what does a hydropower engineer do?
Yeah, so I am recently become federal staff in the Water Power Technologies Office. I was formerly a fellow in the office. My background was more in drinking water, so I'm a little bit still catching up on understanding hydropower, but thinking about the value of water and as a unique resource that fuels so many different aspects of our daily life is something that's been really exciting. So I work at the DOE Water Power Technologies Office on our hydropower side. I manage our innovations for low impact hydro growth portfolio, and I support our hydrowires portfolio.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you for starting us off with that. I have a really simple, easy question for you, but it's just a long one, so bear with me for a second. So the reason we're talking today is because, of course, National Hydropower Day, but also we're talking because of a recent release of a pump storage hydropower valuation guide, right? So, and that helps everyone from developers to pump storage hydropower to utilities understand the value of investing in pump storage hydropower as an energy storage asset. Talk to us a little bit about what the valuation guide seeks to achieve.
Right. So as everybody knows, the Biden administration has set the goal to build a 100% clean energy power sector by 2035 and reach net zero emissions no later than 2050. Hydropower and PSH, pump storage hydropower, are and will continue to be key tools for reaching those clean energy goals. This includes strengthening our existing facilities and a need to build new PSH with these higher renewable penetrations on the horizon. So as part of DOE's Hydrowires initiative, the objective of this valuation guidebook project was to develop a detailed step-by-step guidance that PSH developers, plant owners or operators, or other stakeholders could use to assess the value of an existing or potential new PSH plant and their services. Specifically, we wanted to develop this valuation guidance to support consistency across PSH project comparisons and project designs, test the guidance by applying it to 2 selected PSH projects, and then disseminate this PSH valuation guidance to the hydropower industry and beyond.
Thank you for that. I think it's really important, like what you brought up insofar as the administration's goal of 2050 and how hydropower and pump storage hydropower is going to play a big role in that, right? And that keyword decarbonization is very much at play in this conversation. So thank you for that. You did mention hydro wires, and thank you for explaining that as well. So, and as you mentioned, it's an initiative by Water Power Technologies Office to improve hydropower's contributions to the reliability of the U.S. electrical grid. I can talk to them. But it's really about understanding what hydropower's role in the grid is, right? The role in the electrical grid. Talk to us a little bit about, if you want to expand a little bit about hydrowire, what it is and what's included in this portfolio.
Right. So hydropower is used extensively in the power system for flexibility and resilience, and pump storage hydropower represents 93% of our U.S. grid storage today. So it's clear that hydro and PSH will be critical contributors moving forward for decarbonization. So in response to some of that, WPTO in 2019 launched a grid research initiative called Hydrowires, which stands for Water Innovation for Resilient Electric Systems, in order to understand, enable, and improve hydropower's contributions to reliability, resilience, and integration in the rapidly evolving U.S. electricity system. So the research in hydrowires covers understanding the value under evolving system conditions, much like this project. We also look at capabilities and constraints, operations and planning, and then tech innovation. Some of our other recent projects, we've done a prize competition that was the further advancements to shorten time commissioning for pump storage hydropower, or FAST, and it invited external innovators to research ideas that could make it faster to deploy these PSH technologies. We're also working on a life cycle assessment to understand the environmental impacts over the entire lifespan of a PSH facility. We have partnerships with external entities like GE and EPRI and Missouri Science and Technology to improve modeling. We're also active members, and our Assistant Secretary, Kelly Speaks-Bachman, is also the co-chair for the International Pump Storage Forum. The forum brings together governments, industry, financial institutions, academia, NGOs, everybody from around the world to develop guidance and recommendations on how sustainable PSH can best support the energy transition. And then, of course, the guidebook that we're talking about today and the techno-economic studies that went along with that, and the web-based tool that we're working on as the next step to make it even more accessible for developers.
So that sounds like you have a lot on your plate.
Yes, it's been fun.
But it's all good work, right? It's all good work.
It's fun to work towards, what's such a big goal. So.
Right. So these are all great efforts for considering hydro and PSH's role in evolving grid. But what so how are environmental impacts considered in a pump storage hydropower project?
Yeah, so environmental aspects, they're the foundation for all of our work. It's always important to consider that. You have to consider environmental justice moving forward. Two projects that come to mind that touch on that environmental aspect. We have one called Improving Hydropower Benefits by Linking Environmental Decisions and Power System Trade-offs Through Flow Release Decisions. This project is working on providing pathways for co-optimization between the hydropower system by quantitatively linking the power system needs and the environmental outcomes through a common hub of the flow decisions made at the hydropower facility. So it's trying to find win-wins between what the power system needs and how hydro can operate safely for the river environment. We're starting to see some early results yesterday, so I think they're possible. We're finding some good win-wins that might affect operations. And we also have a project I mentioned on life cycle assessment, or an LCA. It's an important effort to understand and compare the environmental impacts of a closed loop PSH from cradle to grave, well, cradle to cradle, because we're actually considering end-of-life recycling aspects. And so we're thinking it could be a tool that decision makers could be using now. I mean, moving forward, they're having to make a lot of decisions about what types of storage technologies to implement. And it's hard to compare something that lasts 50 years versus 2 years and have completely different materials that go into them and we don't know how to compare the environmental impacts over those entire lifespans between the two. So that's a project I'm really excited about.
I'm glad that you're working on that project. For my last question, hydropower, let's face it, is a pretty old technology. I think the first hydroelectric power plant was built in like in late 1800s, something like that. So, you know, well established. So knowing that we've been using water to generate electricity for almost 140 years now, like, we should know all there is, right? Or do we?
We would think, but in addition to serving as an impactful source of clean energy in its own right, hydropower and PSH also serve as force multipliers for these other renewables, bringing in other sources like wind and solar. And as this renewable deployment increases, electric grid needs will change, and we will have to adapt to incorporate them. And that this means an evolving role for hydro and PSH to give that flexibility and that balancing of renewables. So those changing roles will have different impacts on the existing fleet and what we should be building moving forward. In addition to some of the hydro wires work that I described, we also have work exploring small modular hydropower for new stream reach development. It includes research at the labs and with industry partners to try and standardize design, review, regulation, manufacturing, operations, maintenance, and all the features that are involved to reduce site specificity and cost of a project. It includes work with like fish-friendly turbines, sediment passage technologies, and full facility design at real-world sites. We're also beginning to explore powering of non-power dams. With more than 90,000 dams in the US and less than 3% with hydro, there's potentially large resource available. So we're working on understanding this potential and how to best capture this energy while respecting the original purposes of the dams, as well as potentially being able to utilize the benefit of power production to help fund rehabilitation of these dams, or actually enable better passage of fish for sediment that wasn't there before. So there's still tons of work to do to understand what the grid will need from hydro, what the current capabilities and constraints are to meet those needs, and developing tech innovations to enable us to help reach that clean energy goal, all while balancing challenging water system changes with climate change. So,
of course. That stat you just said, it just still blows my mind. There are 90,000 dams out there and only 3% generate electricity. I mean, I'm just thinking about the possible opportunity there, right?
Yeah, we have an old resource assessment that saw potentially 12 gigawatts. We're working on updating that to better understand, you know, what those dams' primary purposes were to make sure we're respecting if it needed to serve whatever irrigation or navigable water abilities. So we'll see.
So now when you say gigawatts, you're not talking about the docks 1.21 gigawatts off of the, okay, fine. That was a bad joke. I got tons of bad jokes. Okay, so I want to thank you, Katie Jackson, hydropower engineer with the Department of Energy's Water Power Technology Office, for joining us. And I want to make sure, like, we're gonna say goodbye to you now, but I want you to stand around for our panel discussion later, a little bit later.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I have to figure out how to let you go. Oh, is that I'm not as smart as I used to be. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Yes. I'll see you later. Okay, so that was a fun endeavor. So we just spoke with the Department of Energy's Katie Jackson and her role at the Department of Energy in the Water Power Technologies Office, but what she sees as the valuation guide that we're discussing for pump storage hydropower. And now we're going to bring on our next guest, who is Vladimir Kotatarov. He's Argonne's Vladimir Kotatarov, and we can see if he's able to join right now. Vladimir, are you on the line right now? Let's see. Let's see if we can find Vladimir. And if you're just joining us, today we're talking about generating electricity with water, right? So we just spoke with Department of Energy's Katie Jackson a little bit about her role at the Department of Energy and what she's doing from that purview to help usher in a new generation of pump storage hydropower. There are a ton of projects that are on the way that she's helping to shepherd through. And what we're trying to do right now is trying to connect with Vladimir and see if he'll join with us to be able to talk about the Argonne perspective on the valuation guide. Let's see. I don't see Vladimir. Okay, well, let's see if we can go to the next thing. So let's see if Eric Steinle is able to join us. Eric, are you still online? Let's see, Eric. All right. Let's see. Hold on one second, everybody. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Give us 1 second. Okay, so maybe that worked. Let's see. Eric, you're on, so go live with Eric. Hey, Eric, let's join with you right now. We're going to do a little switcheroo right here. I don't see Vladimir. I didn't see Vladimir on the line. So, hey, Eric, how you doing?
Hi there.
All right. Sorry about that. You know, this is live technology, so this is what happens in these occasions, right? But I want to thank you for joining us. Eric, why don't you start off by giving us your name, your title, and what you do with Rye Development?
Yeah, my name is Eric Steinle. I'm a vice president at a company called Rye Development, and we're one of the largest developers of new hydropower here in the United States.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I don't know if many people know, and we talked about with Katie Jackson a little bit while ago, there are 90,000 dams in the country, but only 3% of them generate power. I didn't know that, but I just think there's so much opportunity there. So to generate power, from the perspective of someone like yourself who develops power, what are the opportunities in the development of hydropower as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, just to start with, and leading off of Dr. Jackson's comments and yours, I mean, there's a great opportunity in retrofitting existing dams with new hydropower facilities. As was mentioned, you know, we have a long history of constructing dams for flood control, navigation, irrigation, and other purposes. And there's large portions of the U.S. that have, you know, relied on coal or other sources of generation that can now look to these existing resources to essentially capture a range of flows already being released and manage transportation or flood control and put electricity onto the grid. You know, a second area where we're seeing a lot of growth opportunity are areas of the U.S. that are adding a lot of new wind and solar, also coupled with coal decommissioning and now even some thermal constraints. These areas are seeing capacity challenges where hydro pump storage is a tried and true low cost solution with a lot of examples across the globe to point to. In addition, we're seeing utilities now have to look at a full sort of 24/7 picture of demands, including electric transportation demands, as our electric grid, both you know, individual and mass transit, is going to become more and more linked with the electrical grid here in the next 10 years or so.
Thank you for that. So we've been talking about the pump storage hydropower valuation guide that recently came out. I think it was in May. As a developer, what is one thing that makes this guide indispensable as your company thinks about those new investments you just?
Yeah, and I'm sure that Vladimir will touch on this, but you know, as a developer, really, we're trying to be just ahead of market conditions that will really deliver meaningful value for our projects that allow us, you know, to put metal into the ground. And as I described previously, this has kind of been in niche markets where popular demand or policy is dictating a high amount of renewable penetration. However, you know, utilities across the U.S. are now planning for a low carbon future, and this guidebook is a really useful tool for planners, utility commissioners, and others that are now needing to consider what their low cost storage and capacity resource options could be. And of course, this tool is provided by a trusted third-party independent body. So it's going to be extremely valuable now that large portions, if not all of the US, are looking at what tools they might have And certainly pump storage is a low cost, equitable resource if you're looking at storage options.
You need a guidebook to find out where you're going, right? Right.
Sometimes yes, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So at Argonne, we talk a lot about, I don't know if you know, I don't know if our viewers know, we talk a lot about science and scale, the scale at which we can do science, right? From the tiny to the large. So we could also talk about scale in terms of physical space needed to generate power. Talk a little bit about the benefits of pump storage hydropower may have over other renewable sources in terms of physical space.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this comes up more and more as land use issues are coming up with a lot of wind and solar siting across the US. I mean, I can give an example for one of our own projects. We have a project in Washington State that's 1,200 megawatts in size. This is a closed loop pump storage project. This was mentioned earlier by Dr. Jackson.
Okay, can I tell you just 1 second?
Yeah.
Can you help us understand what 1,200 megawatts is? It's not my computer battery is what I'm
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So 1,200 megawatts, 12 hours of on-demand renewable electricity at 1,200 megawatts. That's enough to provide power to 500,000 homes. And since this project is in Washington State, that's essentially equivalent to all the residences in Seattle. Okay, so on-demand carbon-free electricity for 12 hours a day to the city of Seattle. And for scale, the only really above ground features at this closed loop pump storage project are 2 new 60-acre ponds. All the rest of the facilities are underground, which is pretty common for pump storage. An equivalent amount of megawatts, if you were going to site wind or solar in Washington State, if it were to come from wind power, you'd need 7,000 acres of land. Or if it came from solar, you need 53,000 acres. If it came from solar. So if you're thinking about environmental footprint and the ability to have something that's on demand in your system, it's an extremely wise use of land and the existing electrical grid.
That's amazing. I'm glad you were able to explain that because I had no idea for this conversation how much land use was required. And I had known that solar takes up a certain amount, and I know wind took up a certain amount. I didn't know at least the pump storage hydropower that we're talking about took up so little. Thank you for that. So as opposed to solar, wind and solar, it may take up to 5 years to permit and build a new pump storage hydropower facility. Why does it take this long, and why may the time spent, this 5 years, actually be a good thing?
Good and tough question. So the permitting process with hydro, it's governed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And this is a legacy process, a process that was well in place before, most anyone envisioned any, large scale wind or solar or some of the other technologies that we're talking about coming onto the grid. So to a large extent, the permitting process, is longer, and there isn't a lot of parity between other renewables and hydro. That said, this multi-tiered, multi-year process involves an incredible amount of public oversight, agency, tribal consultation. And so at the end, when you're actually issued a license to construct and operate a facility like a closed loop pump storage facility or any pump storage facility, you're ensured you have a project that's a community asset because it's taken years to really shape what the footprint and overall benefits of the project will be. So I guess from my standpoint, that's one of the benefits of a somewhat long and arduous permitting process.
Yeah, and we were just talking about with Dr. Katie Jackson about the environmental justice aspect of hydropower and how this goes hand in hand with that. So I really appreciate that response. So we're going to let Eric Steinle go. Again, he's from Ride Development. I want you to stick with us now. We have a panel session, so don't go anywhere. We'll talk to him a little bit, okay? All right, I think I know how to do this. There we go. It works. Okay, so we had just spoken with Ride Development's Eric Steinle. He gave us a wonderful inside look at how industry develops and what opportunities there are for the development of new pump storage hydropower facilities in the future. Now we're going to be talking with, if we can get him back on the line, Argonne's Vladimir, who is lead author of the Pump Storage Hydropower Evaluation Guide, and he should be joining us shortly. Can we hear you? And pardon me, I'm going to have to sweat a little bit. I'm going to have to wipe the sweat off. Unbeknownst to me, it is 3,000 degrees in Chicago. So I just found that out. Hey, Vladimir, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
All right, so let's jump into these questions. And sorry about the technical difficulties a little early. I'm not sure what really happened. But as you know, it is National Hydropower Day, and we're talking about energy storage. And we spoke with Katie Jackson about pump storage hydropower as energy storage. We just spoke with Eric Steinle of Right Development and his thoughts on industry and pump storage hydropower. But I'd like to take a step back and discuss what is energy storage and what, so we hear about this word energy storage and we talk about pump storage hydropower as energy storage, but what other types of energy storage are there? Did you hear me? Vladimir, can you hear me? Yep. Let's see.
Yes, glad to be
Vladimir, can you hear me?
helpful with that. So, yeah, there was a little bit of pause in the transmission, I guess, but yes, I got the question. So, in principle, energy storage are devices and technologies that help us store energy at some time and use it at some other time when that energy is more needed or more valuable. So there are different energy storage technologies that are being used now, and also some are being developed right now. So they include the different types of batteries. They include flywheels, compressed air energy storage, pump storage, different types of thermal energy storage, ultracapacitors, and so on. So all of these technologies can store energy and then can produce energy at some other time. Of course, there is a cycle efficiency, so they consume more energy than what they produce. But the value of the energy that they produce typically exceeds the value of energy that is being stored. So they store energy when it's either inexpensive or there is a surplus generation that needs to be stored. And then they produce generation, they produce electricity once that energy is needed by the system, when we have the peak load, when the energy prices are very high, so that the value of energy is greater than. And I mentioned different types of energy storage technologies. There are many different types of batteries that are being developed and in use right now in the power systems. Let me just mention some of the most prevalent ones are lithium-ion batteries. Also, the older types are lead acid that are not used anymore. Then we have sodium sulfur. We have various types of flow batteries. The most known one is vanadium redox and so on. So that's a flow battery that basically has a liquid electrolyte, and it uses pumps to move the electrolyte by the membrane, exchange membrane. And if the electrolyte is moved in one direction, it can actually store the energy. It gets charged. If it is moved in the other direction, then it gets discharged and generates electricity. So all of these different types of energy storage devices have some useful purposes for the power systems applications. Some of these devices have large energy density and capacities, and they can be used to shift large amounts of energy from one time to another. Some are very, very quick in responding, and they can be used to regulate the system, to respond to frequency deviations and things like that. So they can be used mostly for ancillary services and other grid services as well. So different technologies can store energy, and they are basically not competing with each other. There are some that are similar in characteristics that could be used for similar applications, but in principle, we need all different types of energy storage technologies because for all of them, there is some use in the power system.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. So we already explained what pump storage hydropower is, but I want to get to the point that you led the development of the Pump Storage Hydropower Valuation Guide, which lays out the costs and benefits of pump storage hydropower. We talked to Dr. Katie Jackson about that. We talked to Eric Steinle of Right Development about that. But who is the actual audience for this guide, and why does this audience need a guide?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the last part of the question, because there was a little bit of breaking up.
Right. Oh, we love what happens on live TV, right? So you led the development of the Pump Storage Hydropower Evaluation Guide, and we talked with Dr. Katie Jackson about it. We talked with Eric Steinle of Right Development about it. But who is the audience for this guide, and why do we need a guide? Did it happen again? So who is the audience for this guide, and why do we need a guide?
It's still breaking up, but okay, I got the caption. Okay, so well, why we did need a guide, a pump storage guidebook? Because pump storage projects, they provide many different services to the grid, and some of these services, the value of those services are difficult to estimate. So the value of the project itself is basically done through the valuation of different services and contributions that it can provide to the grid. And since we have probably dozens of different services that these projects provide to the grid, the question is, okay, how do we evaluate those services? How do we estimate the value of each individual service and them all together? So what we did was we wanted to develop a guidebook which will develop an evaluation process that's transparent, comprehensive, and objective, so that people can actually apply it for evaluation of pump storage projects and make sure that they have captured all of the aspects of the project, all of the potential revenue streams, all of the potential benefits, as well as the costs of the project. So what we did is we developed a cost, benefit, and decision analysis framework that will be serving as the core for the evaluation process for the pump storage projects. So the cost-benefit analysis is a typical traditional approach for valuing projects. It helps analysts calculate the net present value, the benefit-cost ratio, and other economic parameters, which tell us whether the project is economically feasible, viable, or not. And so that's a traditional approach, but to that one, we also added multi-criteria decision analysis, which is an approach that helps the analyst analyze different alternatives of the project. So if you look into potential different designs or different sizes of the project, different capacities and so on, different number of units, configurations, so you may have different alternatives which you want to evaluate. Okay, which one of these is probably the best for the developer to invest, or for the utility to build, or which one provides the most benefit to the system as a whole. So that is something that the multi-criteria decision analysis can help with, because it can compare different alternatives, their parameters, their attributes, and so on. Through a trade-off analysis can provide some trade-offs among different attributes and determine which alternative is overall the best. And one additional aspect of multi-criteria decision analysis is that it can also take into account both monetized and non-monetized benefits that these projects can provide. Let me just tell you that maybe a handful of most important benefits and services are currently monetized in electricity markets, but the pump storage projects provide also a number of different services and contributions that currently do not have any kind of market mechanisms or revenue streams that are provided by the market operators. And those still may need to be accounted for if you want to look at the value of the project. So multi-criteria decision analysis allows for both monetized and non-monetized two project alternatives, and one is less costly than the other one. If you run just the traditional cost-benefit analysis, the less expensive
That's amazing. Thank you for that. I have time for one more question. That was an amazing explanation. So this guide lists out a number of services, and you were alluding to that a little bit earlier about the fact that, like, what are these services that pump storage hydropower is inherent with the technology? I'd like for you to discuss one specific pump storage hydropower benefit, and let's talk about what transmission load is. We were talking about the electric grid earlier, so I thought this would be apropos. Uh-oh, I think we lost Vladimir. This is wonderful. Maybe it's just the Cook County technology is just not working with us. So if we can, let's bring our gang back. Let's see if we can bring a couple of people back. And we're going to try to bring Vladimir back. We're going to try to bring Dr. Katie Jackson back. And we're going to try to bring, there we go. Stop. All right, here we go. And we're going to try to bring Vladimir back. We got you. Excellent. This is almost working perfectly as live TV can. So thank you all for being patient with me. Let's see if we can get Eric back on with us. Okay.
Oh no, I'm all alone.
You have all of Argonne's followers. Let's see if we can get Eric back here.
Newly found power.
All right, let's see if Eric can join us and give us a second. Pardon me for using this style of Wi-Fi. I had no idea it was going to be this hot in Chicago. Hey, Eric, thank you for joining us again.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can try one more time to get Vladimir with us. All right. Yes. Instagram, yes. I said yes. Please grant my wish. Oh, there we go. All right, we're cooking with gas here. All right. I don't see Vladimir, but I'm going to trust that Vladimir is with us. If not, we'll go ahead and go for it. So, as you know, we had talked about a few questions that all of you could address. And I'd want to center firstly on, hey, Vladimir's coming back. What are the prospects or opportunities for pump storage hydropower, say over the next 20, 30 years? Dr. Kate Jackson, why don't we start with you?
I think, as I mentioned, PSH has been for our energy storage for years, and unfortunately we haven't had a lot built recently. I think with a lot of this plans and goals to reach clean, PSH will be a factor, and I think it'll include capacity upgrades and extensions to existing facilities as well as new facilities. And some of these facilities may look conventional ones. So we have a study that Dr. Vladimir is leading, so he might mention it, that's looking at a lot of innovative PSH technologies, including some that are already funding through net that's using like storage, which is a completely new concept, with Oak Ridge that's looking at a technology called GLOS, where they're actually using air can and water in there for scalable and space absorbed storage for a weird technology. So some of these unique to tackle some of the timelines, I think will be playing a major role.
How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I mean,
over the next 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add on, the goals that Dr. Jackson mentioned earlier really, they ramp up in the next decade or so, and then we have extremely ambitious goals the Biden administration has rolled out by 2050. So over that time, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for pump storage. I mean, thinking about just sort of some of the early leaders out on the West Coast, they're talking about, at least 10,000 megawatts of capacity need, which pump storage is a really good fit for just in the next 10 years. And so, that doesn't actually factor in a lot of the demands from the grid from transportation electrification. And of course, there's a lot more than just what's needed on the West Coast. So, quite a bit of opportunity. Of course, it was mentioned earlier, there are other technologies, and, pump storage won't be the best fit everywhere, right? It does require access to geology and geography, relief, and of course, a sustainable source of water. If it's for a closed loop, it's for a one-time fill. And if it's an open loop system, it's continual use of water. So those are all factors to keep in mind. But I certainly think we'll probably follow along Europe and Asia's lead in incorporating pump storage as penetration levels of wind and solar continue to tick up in the next couple of decades.
That's amazing. Thank you both for that. Next question: considering that the electric grid is currently in a grand transition, right? And knowing that pump storage hydropower takes about 5 to 6 years from idea to execution, what are some key milestones we need to hit in order to ramp up this capability?
Eric,
why don't you go ahead and start off?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So far it's been, the milestones are pretty fragmented across the U.S., right? Because we're not approaching this in a unilateral way. It's based on regional demand and regional policy. In some cases, even very local policy and demand. So, where we're seeing pump storage have a really good fit and where, we need to be thinking ahead is in areas where renewables are exceeding 50% of the actual electricity portfolio. So, and where areas in the grid are utilizing or at least forecasting a lot of additional wind and solar on the system as a large portion of their renewable portfolio. That's where we're seeing potential capacity issues, where there's needed flexibility in the system on providing reliable electricity to the grid. And it's also where we're seeing this capacity credit, if you will, or the credit around storage being something that's long duration. So a type of storage that's 6, 8, 9 hours, sometimes longer, but somewhere in that range. And that's where pump storage really is, a very effective, certainly lower cost tool, not just for utilities, but lower cost means a great deal to ratepayers across the United States, and it's a long-lived asset, of course, and so those are some of the milestones. And of course, you can say that it's easy to say that, and I think we'll have some challenges around fragmentation across the U.S. as we ramp up, I guess, somewhat state to state in our approach to decarbonization.
Yeah, I agree. So some of our capacity expansion studies that we're doing that are trying to figure out how we can actually have a renewable grid, once it gets to those high, like 80 or 90, it's impossible without some of this long duration storage. And I think rapid expansion, we need to make sure that we're planning that PS time. So like when we hit that, we need to make sure that PS has already been in the pipeline to be built into place, so it's ready there while we're reaching those levels of variable renewables. We're also thinking of ways that PSA could be. We have a project looking at how it could not only be an energy asset like we traditionally think of, would be like absorbing grid when needed, serve as a transmission asset. So a big build out involved transmission, and transmission is part of it also. So we've been doing a study to look at if you could strategically place these PSH facilities at high transmission congestion at certain times, it could actually operate as a transmission asset to help alleviate the load of those lines. And that could be very helpful during the transition for transmission.
That's a mouthful right there. I see Vladimir is joining us. Vladimir, can you hear us? No, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I'm going to let you both go. And I'm sorry, Vladimir's been having technological difficulties. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your, celebrating National Hydropower Day with us, but also explaining this much needed valuation guide from pump storage hydropower. Very interesting to see where it's going in the future. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity this afternoon.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. Right. All right, you gotta love a live production, right? I'm so sorry to Argonne's Vladimir Korotarov. It happens, right? We're doing something live. We're using radio signals from these companies that are on our phones. But today we talked about pump storage hydropower. Again, what is that? That's essentially generating electricity out of water resources. We talked to Dr. Katie Jackson from Department of Energy's Water Power Technology Office. She talked about what they're doing from their end, not just in helping national labs and the country get to a future of using more strategic water power resources. We also talked to Rye Development's Eric Steinle and his company's desire to move forward with more pump storage hydropower projects that this valuation guide is helping his and other companies to be able to plan for. And then we talked to Dr. Vladimir Korotarov, and as lead author of this valuation guide, he was really in depth about what the value and benefits of pump storage hydropower is, and really great conversation about what those benefits are and some of the things that we just didn't know. I mean, did you know that there are 90,000 dams in the United States and only 3% generate power? That's loads of opportunity. So I'm really excited about this project. When you think about catchphrases like decarbonization, pump storage hydropower is definitely one of those solutions that we can count on and look forward to helping us reach those numbers by 2050. I want to thank you all for joining us today. It was a fascinating conversation, and you stay dry out there. And if you're in a hot place, stay cool. Take care.